Okay, time to dive into a little thing we call the mailbag. Very, very easy to get involved. Most of you know the drill. If you don't, you fire into those DMs on Instagram at John Middlekauff, 2Fs. Everyone, not including my family, has misspelled that name. So you got to do 2Fs, John Middlekauff, at John Middlekauff, DMs wide open, fire in, get your question answered on the show. If you're watching on the YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the page. If you're listening on the podcast, you guys know the drill. For the pod, give me your thoughts on this. I think Travis is retiring at the end of the season, and Mahomes knows it. And that's why he got so upset. Just go rewatch his rant, and it makes more sense. Also, Jason Kelce retires too, and in 5 years, they both go into the Hall of Fame together. I would say the thing about Jason Kelce is he's still in the peak of his powers. Travis is still good, but now he's got this girlfriend that's worth $1 billion. You just, one thing as you get older, especially like Travis has more money than he ever needed at this point, even though he's been quote unquote an underpaid player. The value of time, and I can relate to this, like at 39 years old, what time means to me is dramatically different than it did 5-10 years ago. And I don't have children yet. The thing I value the most is not money. It's time. And it's the ability to control my time. So Travis Kelce is immediately going down as arguably the best pass-catching tight end of all time, one of the great players of his era, and he's won multiple championships. And here's the thing with Travis, a lot like Jason, he's got multi-talents. He could do movies, he could host shows, he could do whatever he wants. And I think as you get older and you realize, like, I can make money other ways, you kind of drift toward like maybe the thing that you're passionate about. And I think he loves football. I wonder if he's thought about it this year. He got injured a couple times. Rehab probably sucks. And it's like, what am I doing this for? To win another ring? Like what it's not really going to change some argument for me arguing against you. Like, well, Gronk's got 3. He's only got 2. Like, who fucking cares to them? I mean, ultimately, Brady's kind of an outlier. Like, I want 10. He's got 2 rings. How many players in the history of the NFL who are star players, non-quarterbacks, have 2 rings? Like, he's in pretty special company. So I didn't never cross my mind. I haven't really spent that much time thinking about Travis retiring, though. Someone said, did he say it on his podcast or he said it somewhere? Wouldn't shock me at all. Would not shock me at all. Which, listen, if the Chiefs are going to have a true dynasty, they're going to go through the iteration of a team without Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. They've been without Tyreek for now this year too. If Travis leaves, and I think you would have to say, is Chris Jones, are they going to give him $120 million? Or do you tag him and trade him? Or I don't even know if he's taggable. I forget what. I'd have to go back and look at the details of the way it all played out. But you know what I mean. Look at Belichick and Brady. They literally had 3 different teams. The Brewski, Vrabel, kind of that group, Rodney Harrison. Then they had the Moss, Welker kind of group. And then they transitioned to the Edelman, Gronk, McCourty, Hightower group. So think how many different teams Andy's had in his career that have won. So I'd feel pretty good if I'm a Chiefs fan, but that's a hell of a point by you. Yeah, I guess, yeah, very possible. Because I wonder if Mahomes knows if he is going to retire. That would have been on the short, like, minute-long reel. I mean, that's one of the coolest plays we've ever seen. Truly is. That was badass. My jaw, when that play happened, hit the floor because I thought, I'm more of a defender on Sean McDermott. Biased, know the guy. He's always been cool to me. I do believe he's a little stiff. Listen, some people are. But to lose like that, I think it would have ended his career in Buffalo. I think he might not have made it till next week in Dallas. He probably does, but you know what I mean. Like that loss, it's one thing to lose. If they would have lost on that play, it almost felt like version of what happened to them in the 13-second game on steroids. It was crazy. It was like, what? Got very lucky. I mean, can you imagine Tony walking around that town? How does he go to a restaurant? How does he go anywhere? In recent pods, you've been talking how NFL owners can fire coaches at will because of their money. This is from Evan. I work for a pro sports team and have talked to the owner And recently he said coaches and GMs are hired to be fired. How true is this throughout the league? P.S. Some of the boys are looking to take a trip down to Arizona for a fall or for a golf trip in February. Any courses that you recommend? Right around waste management time, so I'd hit that tournament. Weekapow, Troon, Whirlwind, Raven, a little cheaper, but solid. I would say when it comes to the owners, think about the history of, let's just stick with the NFL, but I think it rings true in the overwhelming majority of sports, pro sports. Coaches, GMs, and players. How many of them, this one's for John, right off into the sunset? How many Ozzie Newsomes retire, still get paid a lot, and are around the organization? I would say historically, most guys are fired. Take most of the older Super Bowl winning coaches in the league. Belichick fired. Andy Reid fired. Pete Carroll fired multiple times. McCarthy fired. So this young crew of guys who have not been fired yet, LaFleur, obviously Kyle McVay, Vrabel, like if you coach long enough, it's kind of inevitable. Could be speaking out of turn, but like the Pat Rileys who have never been fired is pretty rare, right? I mean, the best coach in football history, at least resume-wise, Belichick, got shit canned. I mean, Andy Reid, the current best coach, over the last decade, fired. So it's just part of the drill. I don't think there's really any way to avoid it. It's kind of crazy. It's just the nature of the business, and I think your guy's right. I wonder what owner that is. Hey, John, we've all seen the rise of Purdy. It's gotten me curious about other backup quarterbacks who might be going under the radar. If it wasn't for a couple injuries, we might never have seen Purdy take a snap. Do you think the situation like this is an outlier? Or would the coaching staff have seen his ability in practice and given him an opportunity at some point? There seem to be a lot of teams struggling at quarterback at the moment. I'd love to see more guys get a chance. Well, if you have an established starter in the top, I would say like 18, almost down to what Jimmy was a couple years ago, Derek Carr now. Once you start paying them a decent amount of money, those guys are set, right? In terms of those guys are going down with the ship. Now, Purdy made the team after being a 7th round pick. So he did enough in training camp to catch the eye of Kyle Shanahan, right? He was the 3rd quarterback when they brought back Jimmy Garoppolo. So he had definitely impressed. Like, you have to impress in practice. Like, clearly Jake Browning has improved. They felt comfortable enough making Jake Browning the backup quarterback coming into the NFL. Now, these last couple games, it's hard to watch Jake Browning and think, he's not bad. I mean, he could just be a bridge starter. Could someone give him $10 million just to handle a season as they were going through some shit? Doesn't seem crazy. I see a lot worse. And it makes you wonder that how many guys like him. Now, I would say Purdy, better college player than Jake Browning, but he's a good example. You can improve. Most of us, if you think about it, in any business we do, you improve, like ideally, as time goes on. You get better at your craft. You kind of hone it. You figure things out. But, whether you're working for someone, whether you own the business, it gets better as you go. But if you're a backup quarterback, they see in practice, kinda, because you're going against the scout, or you are the scout team quarterback. The NFL is not, if you're the backup quarterback, the starting quarterback takes every freaking rep, right? So you're over there with the defense. It's why when Purdy began playing, his biggest, advocate was Fred Warner, right? Because like Debo and all these, they never played with him. Trent, at first it was like, oh, we'll see what he's got. Fred Warner was the guy, like, I'm telling you, this dude can play. I've been telling Kyle for a while, this guy's this guy's good. So the defense, ironically, probably can give you a better scouting report if the guy's good or bad than sometimes the coaching staff, because the defensive coaching staff's over there with some of the young assistants running the cards, especially if you have an offensive head coach. Now, those guys, if they're doing their job, should be watching that film as well during the week. But once you get a top 10 quarterback, you're just so focused on that guy. People don't realize once the season starts, it's on the player to do a lot of the fundamental stuff. Like the team is just focused on a weekly basis about the opponent when you play. So it's complicated. Think how many guys that, in NFL history, like it's very, very difficult to play wide receiver, to play D-line, to play linebacker, and to not get an opportunity if you're in the league a couple years. Because inevitably guys get injured, you end up playing, you get to play special teams so you can stand out that way. You just get some run. You eventually get a starting gig. I remember listening to Will Compton tell a story, like how he made the team and then the guys got injured. And then by the end of the season, his rookie year, I think he was an undrafted free agent. He started. Like it's hard at quarterback, right? Not necessarily now because all these injuries, but it's very easy. Like if you play behind a guy that never gets injured, you just never fucking play. And the only tape, like when you scout a guy like that, is the preseason. And let's face it, the preseason is pretty irrelevant. So it's just a complicated thing. This is a people business. So there's a lot of guesswork. There's a lot of stuff that you can't quantify clearly with quarterback. How fast you process, how well you read, how well you handle pressure. It took for Zach Wilson literally saying F it. That was the motto of the Jets and just playing loose to finally look good for a half. Think about that. So I have a lot of respect for anyone who sniffs playing in the NFL at any position. Maybe not kicker or punter. You just God-given talent. And then if you're able to kind of work your way up, because it's truly in a world, let's face it, like the meritocracy in America is long gone. Rigged game. Football's not a rigged game. If they think you can play, you play. And at every position, you ultimately get a chance to play. But quarterback is one that you can just never get your shot. You can just never get your shot. And some guys like Purdy, broken leg, broken foot, boom, he's in. It's actually happened to a lot of guys, if you think about it in recent memory. Most of them have just kind of sucked. This is from Gunner. The thought just occurred to me about player contracts, and I'd love to get your take. Shohei Ohtani just signed a massive deal, which averages $70 million a year. I saw a post on Instagram that it said after taxes, he will only take home $34 million a year. This means over 50% is taken out of his salary. Not sure if that is just by the state of California, includes federal taxes. It includes it both. But we'll get into this in a second. My question is this. Do you think we will ever see players, any sport, college or pro, stop signing at all or as frequently with teams and schools in these incredibly high tax cost of living market states due to the economics of where the team is located? From a business perspective, it makes a lot of sense, but I also recognize that there are some really good franchises in some of these markets. The Niners, the Lakers, the Rams, the Dodgers, the Yankees. It would be hard to say no to these teams. Well, here's the thing. It was just reported. It's one of the craziest contracts in the history of sports. He signed a 10-year contract, and he's only making $2 million a year and deferring $680 million, which probably is going to turn out to be genius unless inflation just fucking rips for a decade, because he will immediately move to Vegas. He will immediately move to Jupiter, Florida, and probably take home the difference of $100 million in a no state income tax haven state, which is smart business. Now, there are a lot of factors here, which is talking about Ohtani specifically, because Bobby Bonilla gets a lot of credit for his contract. It's actually moronic. You would rather have the $30 million up front instead of spreading it out over 30 years. Even if you get $17 million of that from taxes and then invest it, you would have flown by if you just would have invested in the S&P back in 1995 or whenever he signed the contract. Now, when you talk about money at this level, it's just an all-time chess move by everybody involved. It really is. Speaking of the Dodgers, and I grew up hating them because I'm a Giants guy, I have nothing but respect for the way they're operating. The San Francisco Giants are a fucking joke, an absolute embarrassment. And the Dodgers, you can be like, well, they've never won a World Series. True. They won the fake, bubble 60-game one. But the team they're putting together, adding Ohtani, I watch baseball to watch stars. It's 7 million games during the summer. Give me some entertainment. And their team is really entertaining. And clearly, Ohtani, here's the thing. I do think the Bay Area, the Giants are in more trouble than the Niners. Because in football, it doesn't really matter. you're kind of stuck. They can franchise you. Like, you think Nick Bosa wants to live in California? Of course not. He's a Florida guy. He goes there immediately when the season ends. Debo Samuel, they had to tell him last year, like, you can't go to Florida. You got to stay on the West Coast. So he immediately came to Scottsdale. But the team's sweet. You end up making more money off the field. I don't think it hinders it that much because you can make a ton off the field if you're playing for the Yankees, if you're playing for the Lakers, if you're playing for the Niners. Ideally, like I've said this forever, the Cowboys would be the number one free agent destination. They just never have any cap space because Jerry's always paying premiums for his own guys. But if they ever had openings, it would be a double whammy. You get the brand and you get no state income tax. Like, I'm sorry, anyone like, who cares about taxes? Like, has never made any fucking money. Has no clue what they're talking about. Because I just crossed an imaginary line and my net worth fucking skyrocketed. My yearly income, I mean, it didn't double, but it went up dramatically, crossing an imaginary line. I can take an hour flight to go back if I want. And I'm actually closer to Southern California, which I'm a Northern California guy. Southern California is nicer. Like, if I take the emotion out, not a soul that is not from California or Northern California would ever choose Sacramento or San Francisco over Manhattan Beach, Newport Beach, San Diego. Nobody. And it's always been like that in pro sports for the most part. Football is different that way. Obviously, the Lakers have always benefited from that historically, and I understand why. If Mike McCarthy wins a Super Bowl with Dallas, does he get in the Hall of Fame? 100%. How many coaches you'd have to ask, like Belichick or, one of the guys in NFL films? Pretty short list of guys that have won multiple Super Bowls with two different teams. Belichick didn't. Andy Reid didn't. Parcells did not. It's incredible accomplishment to get to two Super Bowls with two different teams, right? Bill didn't. Andy did. Pete did not. He'd be on a short list, man. He'd be on a short list. I'm sure there are other guys that I'm missing. Holmgren is one, but he only won it with the Packers. Walsh only coached for the Niners. I mean, Jimmy Johnson quit. I guess he went to Miami, but he never made the Super Bowl. Got to give McCarthy his flowers, man. Something that seems so obvious about Kansas City penalty, I don't think enough people are talking about, is that the flag is thrown as soon as the play starts. If that was an incomplete pass to Kelce with a 5-yard flag on top, nobody is shitting a brick today. But it just happened to develop one of the coolest plays ever. That's the thing. It's like, if you like sports, there are certain plays in any sport, like a walk-off inside the park home run, right? A half-court shot to win it in March Madness. That Kelce play where if you're watching it live, which I would imagine, I haven't seen the television ratings, 30+ million people were watching Chiefs, Bills at that time especially, you like fell out of your couch. I mean, my heart stopped. Because again, I thought, listen, Andy's a made man. They're going to be fine. McDermott's career ends. I thought Travis Kelce, that was my first thought. Not even the play was cool. I thought Travis Kelce just ended a man's career. And it felt like he fucking ended the Bills. It was crazy. And then not only was it Tony, it went to Tony. He was the guy. There's just the visual of Josh Allen on the side looked like his whole family just got murdered. Never seen anything like that. Good point, though. Good point. Hey, John, why can't my guy Stefanski get some credit? Guy has steered us through losing 3 of our starting 5 offensive linemen, our all-pro running back, and the guy we're paying $230 million to play quarterback. He has Joe Flacco looking like it's 2015 and us in position to grab the 5 seed. You're not in position. You're grabbing the 5 seed, homie. You guys are going to the playoffs. We also have beaten the Ravens and the Niners, who are both, in my opinion, the 2 best teams in each conference. Would you agree he deserves Coach of the Year? Here's the thing I will say. It's starting to get a little uglier for my man Dan Campbell, Motor City Kitties. If Dan Campbell wins 12 games for the Lions, it's the fucking Lions. Now, the way he got there was a little weird. It's still the Lions. Now, you could argue they won 9 games last year, so it's only a 3-game improvement. The Browns were a disaster last year. They're clearly way better. I definitely think he's thrown his hat in the ring. I'm recording this before LaFleur and Green Bay has played. If they win, he's definitely in the mix. They got rid of Aaron Rodgers, and they might make the playoffs with Jordan Love. So, yeah, I mean, Is it, how do we define the award? That would be my question. Is it a guy that had expectations? Like most everyone with a pulse picked the Lions to be pretty good. So if he wins 12 games, yeah, it's what you should have done. You had a good team, division down a little bit. Or is it a guy like the Browns who have seen the worst stuff happen on a weekly basis? Injury after injury after injury. And quarterback down. Even Myles Garrett's banged up. You get Joe Flacco off the couch. He's breaking down the team. and honestly, gave a great speech. I'm like, God, Joe Flacco seems like a cool guy. Yeah, he definitely get it. If McVay would have beat the Ravens, he would have definitely been in the mix, but somehow him and Stafford fucked up the timeouts at the end of the game. Big fan of you and Colin, but I wanted to get your take on two things. Colin always compares Big Ben and Cam as far as physical beings who deteriorated, but I don't think they're really comparable. Cam Newton's last prime year, he was 29, and Big Ben's was 36. 7 years is a long time. So thoughts on why he groups them together. I've gotten a lot of this. I've seen a lot in like our Instagram and Twitter comments. Sometimes it's harder when you're on Zoom. If that comes up again, because I'm with you, Cam Newton did not have the career Big Ben had. Cam Newton's high was really high, pretty short-lived. Big Ben was really good into his mid-30s. He was, I mean, Big Ben's a Hall of Famer, no doubt about it. To me, Cam Newton is not. So I'm in agreement there. I think where he lumps them both in together is, listen, I think Colin's always been hard on Ben because he thinks that he's an underachiever, which is a weird thing to say for a guy that had the achievement, but I do think it's fair, right? A lot of beer, a lot of hot dogs, did not take football as seriously from a training standpoint as Brady, as Rodgers, as Manning, right? And he was physically as gifted as anybody, just like Cam. So I think he lumps them in as like Big Ben in his younger years, all-time physical freak. Now, he was a better pocket quarterback as he got older. Cam Newton could not. So that is more than fair. Obviously, Big Ben in his 30s was still very, very good. Cam Newton sucked. That being said, Josh Allen is 27, and his take that he has 3 more prime years left would you match up with Cam Newton's career trajectory. Do you think he only has 3 more prime years left? Well, if he's 27 years old, he takes a lot of physical hits. Like the one thing when you watch a lot of these, like Mahomes, he is less likely to try to run guys over. And when you run guys over, like I don't think there's going to be a deterioration like Cam, because Cam was carrying the ball at such a high clip. Because he's, I mean, to me, the most greatest power runner of all time from a quarterback. Inevitably, someone's going to crack you and shatter a bone, shatter your shoulder, shatter your elbow. So I wouldn't pick a number, because if you told me if he didn't get hurt, he's got 5 elite years left. But at any moment, something really, really bad can happen. It's inevitable. This is football. And while the big hits have been taken out of the game, the speed has never been faster. So if you're not looking and all of a sudden you kind of lower your shoulder and that Dre Greenlaw, that, whoever the big hitting linebacker, maybe a defensive end, TJ Watt type guy comes and cracks you, it could really injure some stuff. And if that happens, that could throw off his career trajectory. The problem with him is, and you saw this forever with Cam, I want you to run. It's like one of your elite characteristics. But maybe as you age, and this has always been Steve Young's thing, and he wasn't a power runner, but he was a great runner, kind of more like Lamar. See, what Lamar's really good at, one, his touch has dramatically improved as a passer. But when you watch him play, remember how Peyton Manning used to just hit the ground? Like, people were going to sack him. He's like, I'm not getting mollywopped. Like, I'll hit the ground and we'll play another down. Lamar does that when he runs. Like, Lamar sees like 3 linebackers are kind of close. He hits the ground. He doesn't really do the slide. He just kind of plops. And that's going to save his career. Josh Allen, I mean, yesterday, one of the big plays was him carrying a pile like he was Earl Campbell. To me, that's kind of Jalen's deal. Like, okay, everyone's loving the tush push, but can you imagine the pounding? I saw someone, I think, tweet out, like, what if they just ran the tush push every single play? They'd bleed the clock. They'd inevitably score. Do you know what that would do to your O-lineman, your quarterback? It'd kill them. Like, especially your O-lineman. They'd be exhausted. You can't. And I think the guy was kind of being sarcastic, facetious, whatever, but I don't know. Why can't fans of the NFL see what Mahomes is a sore loser who cries when he loses and walks off the field? Well, I talked about this on the podcast. So did Brady. So did Tiger. So did Kobe. What did Vince Lombardi say? Show me a good loser, I'll show you a loser. He ain't used to losing, right? I mean, most winners don't handle it well. Most rich guys don't handle losing money well. The broke guy handles it better. Why? He's not used to any money. Most losing quarterbacks, like, oh, he handles himself very well at the podium. Yeah, he fucking never wins a game. He's never been above 500. That's all he knows. Question across the pond. Thanks to the pod, helps me keep in touch with the NFL. The Chiefs, obviously not having a good season by their standards. How much do they miss Eric Bieniemy being the OC? Well, Andy Reid's been calling plays the whole time. I mean, just like Eric Bieniemy, now Matt Nagy, they periodically call the plays. I think their problem is they just ran into the perfect storm. They've drafted some wide receivers who aren't good enough. Rice looks pretty good, but the Sky Moore situation has not worked out. And Travis Kelce is not the same guy. So my guess is this offseason, it's less like, to me, their offense it's Andy Reid's baby. What did Andy Reid say? This guy's never getting a job from me. He's got to leave because I get all the credit. Rightfully so. I mean, I've seen it. What I think the Chiefs are going to do this offseason is they're going to do two things. They're going to draft a skill guy really high, especially if they're out in the first round. Let's say they have the 23rd pick. Would it shock you if they trade next year's one to move up to like 10 to draft one of the sweet wide receivers, like the wide receiver from Florida State? And they will sign a tight end, and I would imagine they will try to do what the Patriots always did, a Mike Evans type guy, an older player who's like, hey, man, you want to win another Super Bowl? You want to come play with Patrick Mahomes? I think they got Mike Evans written all over him. Honestly, kind of more surprised Mahomes hasn't lost his shit sooner. He hasn't been playing his best ball, but their receivers are two scoops of ass and relying on a second-round rookie to be the number one wide receiver and 34-year-old Kelce. Listen, man, you do not win the Super Bowl every year. You'd be like, Middlekauff, you just love the Chiefs, and you're like, no, I just followed football my whole life. Like, when I was really, really young, Walsh and Montana didn't win the thing every year. Sometimes you have a down year. I had a front row seat like everyone my age to the Belichick-Brady experience. They got bounced in the second round every once in a while. The Jets beat them. The Broncos beat them. Like they didn't always win the Super Bowl. They got to a lot of AFC Championship games, and the Chiefs easily still could. You're not guaranteed every year. I think the thing, if you're the Chiefs, a fan, I mean, I bet Andy and Beach it sucks because you get used to winning. You have faith in the future. Why? You have an elite coach. You have an elite quarterback. You have an elite general manager. Like Brett Veach has kind of proven it. Remember last year when they won the Super Bowl with all those random guys on defense? Who the fuck do you think picked them? What stops a good NFL coach from leaving a poor franchise for a better one like college? Browns coach is making Joe Flacco look good, but the Browns are never going anywhere, and their owners, especially with Watson's big cap hit, starting next year. Why doesn't he leave and go get a better organization? Because in college, I am not beholden to a contract status from another team. I truly do not care. It's irrelevant. Maybe depending on the way the contract's written, I have to pay a buyout. But in the pros, we're all under the same umbrella. We are all partners. Where if I'm at USC, I'm not a partner with Oklahoma. We're not in the same conference. Our businesses aren't connected. I mean, we're all college football teams, but I can steal Lincoln Riley. Right? In the NFL, we all fall under the same contractual umbrella, no different with players. Right? Why can't, if I'm the Rams, just go pick a player, Devontae Adams off the Raiders? He's under contract. Well, if I'm pick a team that needs a head coach, right? Let's use the Raiders as an example. Why can't I just hire Bill Belichick? Well, he's under contract with the Patriots. So they have rules because of the business model, but they're all in business together. Ultimately, what makes the league and just professional sports leagues unique, especially the NFL, right? In professional basketball, the television rights from ESPN and TNT are the big rights, but we also have individual rights with our local networks, right? I was listening to a podcast talking about the history of the NFL. Once upon a time, way back in the day, the Jets had an independent television deal in New York. And then eventually, I forget exactly who it was, might have been under Rozelle. Again, not a football historian, but they all got together and said, we're stronger as a unit, right? Yeah, in the immediate, you might lose a little money, but in the aggregate, long view, big picture, we're all going to make more. And they were right? It's not that way in other sports. The Dodgers, the Giants, the Yankees, whoever, their local market is where they do business. In the NFL, think about this. Who's a team that's shitty, right? The Panthers are a joke, right? They are going to get the same amount of money as the Cowboys, the Eagles, and the 49ers, who have been a part of the biggest games, the biggest television ratings. Yet when CBS, ABC, Fox, NBC cut the media checks throughout the year, the same goes to Jerry as goes to David Tepper. What makes it the most incredible business, definitely in sports, and one of the great businesses we have in America right now, is because they use their group. It's why, okay, you want Sean Payton? Well, technically he's still under contract. So Denver, if you want him, it's going to cost you a first-round pick, even though he took a year off. I actually think it's smart. And that's one issue we have in college sports is there's no unity. Not everyone, the SEC is united, the Big Ten is united, but not everyone's on the same page. Just a question on Mahomes. I talked about it earlier. I think it's really just they're not used to losing. They really aren't. I don't care if things are as clear as day. When you're used to something and then something goes the other way, even if you're a high-level guy, even if you're a professional, you fucking crack. Why does Tom, after every Super Bowl he ever lost, storm off the field like a little crybaby? He's a terrible loser. Awful. Why? He's a winner. Stefanski over Tomlin? Right now, for sure. The Belichick Lee Corso was pretty cool. Someone just sent me the video. I remember I didn't watch it live. And I get a couple people texting me if I'd ever been to the Army-Navy game. And I went when I lived in Philly. It used to be at the Link. It basically travels between where the Eagles play, where the Ravens play. I don't remember it being in Foxborough, but maybe Kraft got a hold of it. Obviously, it was just there. Listen, I ran the wing tee in high school, so I have a soft spot, especially, this little pulling guard right here. It was pretty terrible. But I tried. I got tossed one time by Kyle Devan when we played Vacaville High School. But the pageantry in the pregame a couple hours before is the coolest thing you'll ever see. If you love America, that 2 hours is about as cool as it gets. It's truly pretty special. The game, it's not exactly Bam LSU, but everything surrounding the game, it's a powerful moment. It really is. I'm glad I did it when I was there. My nightmare scenario is starting to unfold. Bears are 5-4 in their last 9, but it's obvious Fields still can't read a defense. Do you think it's possible the Bears bring Fields? No chance. Fields is done. Fields is not going to be the Bears quarterback next year. Now, if you told me the Panthers thing never happened and they just ended up with the 10th pick, I would say, yeah, Fields is going to be your quarterback next year. You have the number 1 overall pick. Fields, if I was a betting man right now, he's on the Falcons. But why wouldn't the Patriots? There are a ton of teams that are going to be interested. See some of the who's Minnesota's quarterback? That there are countless teams that are just, it happens every single year that you're like, screw it. We can get this guy for, Colin thought of one. I just don't see it. His contract is going into year 4. You have to pick up the 5th-year option. I think he goes for like a 3rd-round pick, would be my guess. But I do think he's somewhere else next year. And I still believe Eberflus. The one problem with the Bears is like Kevin Warren, the guy that used to run the Big Ten, he's there now. It's like, I don't love when administrators get to take over football. Like, what the fuck do you know about football? Like, why do you just get to run an NFL team? That would make me nervous as a Bears fan. Like, does this guy get to do it? Like, listen, we can argue about some of Ryan Poles' move. It's your GM. You make some bad decisions. Shit happens. Like, hey, listen, Chase Claypool move, all-time moronic move. Right. Panther move, fantastic. Awesome move to get DJ Moore, who's under contract as well. Right. I could argue the Montez Sweat. I can see both sides. I wouldn't do it, but maybe I value picks too much. I heard Colin go on this rant about how, the Cowboys got Gilmore for a 5th-round pick. I'm all for mid-round picks. I think 2nd-round picks, especially when you're not that good. Now, if that pick ends up being 50, listen, I'm not stubborn enough to change my opinion. But Ryan Poles, here's what I know. Ryan Poles played in the NFL. He scouted and worked for Andy Reid for a long time. If Eberflus got to go, unless Eberflus wants to be my defensive coordinator, I need to get an offensive head coach. I'll let Ryan Poles get another bite at the apple. I don't like when administrators get their hands in things. Feels too much like government. A bunch of people like, what the fuck are you actually doing? I'll tell you what you're doing. You want to get your name in bright lights and get credit for shit that you have nothing to do with. Just sell the freaking tickets, sell the suites, keep your mouth shut, put on a suit on game day, sit by the owners. Stay out of football. Another Cowboy take. 2-parter, so bear with me. Dan Quinn is an elite coordinator and was a top pick for several teams a few years ago, but he chose to stay in Dallas, clearly for less money. Well, if you said, John, what do you think Dan Quinn makes? I'd say minimum $5 million. So, yeah, I guess, he might have been a head coach for $7 million, but wait, I don't get any responsibility a head coach has to deal with. I only have to deal with half the team. You pay me $5 million in Big D? What can organizations do holistically to keep premium coordinators from jumping ship? Pay. I mean, it's just that simple. Cut checks, right? If the guy wants to leave, he's going to leave. Because let's face it, there is a big difference. Dan Quinn was already rich. Dan Quinn's already been a head coach. So Dan Quinn has millions of dollars in the bank, right? So to me, if he wanted to jump ship, if there's an offer there, it just comes down to this. In football, there are meeting rooms, especially the coaching staff / scout meeting rooms. There's a long table, a long rectangular table, typically. The head coach sits at the front, right? Everyone else sits on the sides, coordinators included. Are you cool with sitting on the side? Or do you want to sit back at the front? Because when you sit at the front, everyone looks at you, like the quarterback in the huddle. They answer to you. So that to me is a powerful thing that, like, once you're already rich, maybe he likes doing this. He's, like you said, he's awesome at it. Now, I'd be interested to see him get another shot. Like, to me, Vic Fangio, awesome coordinator. That's where he belongs. Todd Bowles, probably the same thing. Not probably. I mean, I think he is. Even though he's respectable as a head coach. It's not terrible. But he, just like Dan Quinn and just like Vic Fangio, someone would give him a 3-year deal at $15 million. It's more money than anyone's getting in, like, I mean, he'd make more money than a lot of college coaches being the coordinator. Also, no need to say, but the Dallas Cowboys are a huge draw for TV ratings, so I'm assuming talking Dallas on the pod provides an uptick in streams. Yeah, I mean, I subscribe. Like, I'm a big market guy, so I'm naturally going to lean. I watch those teams, but if the Cowboys were 4-12, I wouldn't talk about them. And maybe that would be a problem. Like, the reason the Niners, Eagles, and Cowboys are 3 of the biggest brands in the league, but they're also the best teams. So it makes it pretty easy, right? If they sucked and other teams were up top, I'm just talking I lean to pretty simple, like, try to talk about what I want to talk about. And luckily, I think I lean toward the right things to talk about. But I'm not a big force it guy. The Cowboys, to me, are interesting because they're fucking good. I mean, they're really good. They've been in 2 of the bigger games this season. 1-1, I guess 3 of them. The 2 Eagle games and the Niner game. They're interesting. I mean, they might have the MVP of the league. They got Mike McCarthy, former Green Bay Packer. The Green Bay Packers, same thing. Massive brand. If Jordan Love had sucked and they're a 2-win team, they're just not as interesting. They start winning games. Jordan Love looks good. It's easy to talk about. So I think it's less to me about streams and clicks and first and foremost being interesting. And luckily, for the most part, the big brands, the major players are involved in the important shit, right? Like, are Peyton Manning and Tom Brady bigger deals than everyone else in the league when they're playing? Of course. They're also typically on the best teams. So it's double whammy. Like, talking about the Yankee team over and over that's not going to make the playoffs kind of bores me. Just letting you know, Dylan Gabriel was only playing on 2 years at Oklahoma because OU stud kid named Jackson Arnold Gabriel was planning on going pro, but his draft grade wasn't good enough. I didn't know that. So you're saying that he is getting Wally pipped? How bad did the Eagles get shafted by the schedule? Last year their schedule was a joke. So, part of having a first place schedule is you play good teams, right? One thing they have is like the NFC West and the AFC or in the NFC East play each other. It's like the Niners play the Cowboys and the Eagles, right? The Cowboys play the Rams and they beat them. They play all these teams. I don't think it's shafted by the schedule. It's just part of the way it works. The Bills are 6-6. The Chiefs are struggling, and they beat those two teams. You don't just look at the end of the schedule. They get the Giants twice and the Cardinals in Seattle, who fucking sucks. I was an average, at best, high school wide receiver, but we were always taught to check with the ref to confirm we are on the line of scrimmage. Tony was clearly over the ball. Do NFL refs help out wide receivers on their alignment? I would assume if Tony did, quote unquote, check, there was video going around. He points at the ref, but he's not really even looking at him, and he just kind of puts his head down. Right? It's one of those like, hey, how you doing? But I'm not even looking at your face, so I don't even know what you're saying to me. It was a pretty fake check with the side. But I hear you. Like in that moment, do you know why football coaches in the sport of football has so much in common with like the military? Because details and discipline are so important. The fundamentals on your footwork in the fourth quarter in December are just as important as they are September, against a shitty team, right? The details of pointing at the referee, a pretty, you would say overall in the grand scheme of things, small, minute detail of the sport is just as critical in practice as it is in a preseason game, as it is final play against, Josh Allen's Buffalo Bills. And details of a guy like, Jerry Rice or Devontae Adams, a guy that just would never screw that up, and a guy like Tony, who clearly has a lot of talent. We could debate how much talent he has, but he's definitely a talented player. And something's missing. Like that Tyreek Hill that would never in a million years. That would never happen to Travis Kelce. That would never happen to George Kittle. That would never, ever, like Devontae Smith on his worst day wouldn't make that mistake. Cooper Kupp, no fucking chance. Details matter in anything we do. And the standard is the standard when no one's looking and when everyone's looking. And if you carry that over, it's why athletes if you take everything, if you take one thing serious, you can take everything serious. And it feels like Tony's like, I'm not a big serious guy. Drops, my hands, whatever. Maybe he's got bad hands. I don't know. Just wanted to say I'm a big Titans fan, but at the point in the season, I just want to watch good games. But 8 flags in the first quarter of the Cowboys versus the Eagles game. What the F? Players can't even play at this point. This is supposed to be a rivalry looking like an OSHA meeting. Just wanted to see what your take is. Listen, I think officials in general get too involved. Like, just let a game breathe. Just let it, no different than a broadcaster. Just let the game happen. And I think sometimes it's very difficult for them to almost take a step back. And the referee, vitriol, people up in arms has only grown over the years because it definitely feels like they've struggled with just letting things be. Like some stuff's ticky-tack. They're battling downfield. Like not everything's a defensive holding. This is the pros. This is not a high school football game. Like let them play. There are millions of dollars on the line. It's got to be difficult to judge these guys in full speed situations, but it's never been worse. And every time you see a flag on the field, you're like, what is going on? But then it goes the other way too. Like when you see plays like, where's the flag? So it's just one of the variables in the sport of football that, listen, everyone bitches and moans, but 30 million people are watching these games. Not until you turn off the TV and stop watching, I just don't think anything's ever going to change.